Hello, everyone. It is my absolute distinct pleasure to have you here today to learn about Learning Blade's newest resource, Introduction to Coding. Dr. Dane Boynton, who is the CTO, and I think we all agree in the Learning Blade team, the part of the brain that puts all this amazing stuff together, is going to share what he's done here with the team and actually with others from out of Learning Blade that really supported this effort. He's going to share the work we've done to make coding something that's accessible for middle school, 7th, 8th, really even into 9th grade teachers in a way that's easy, accessible. It's there, the lesson plans are there. And then hopefully through this recording, and this recording, we will send out the recording tomorrow. You could always come back and look at some of this, share it with the teachers, administrators in your area, in your network, let them watch the recording, because through the recording, they'll be able to log in and get started with our brand new Introduction to Coding. So Dane, if you'd like to just take it away and show us what we've created here.
Thanks, Joshua. Really appreciate that, and appreciate all of you joining us here today. I think this is a topic that's really going to be very useful for a lot of people, because as we know, across the nation, more and more schools are really wanting to make computer science part of what they introduce students to early and earlier, because if they don't have the right awareness of what these careers and what this topic is, then they may not be taking the classes they wish they would take in high school. So we want to make sure that they have a little bit of a taste of this before they get to high school, so that they can really plan appropriately for this. And so we're trying to make this easier for you to be able to do this in your own classroom. So I'm going to go through just a little bit about why we're doing this. I won't spend a lot of time on the traditional Learning Blade, but you know that in Learning Blade, we have these missions and they follow a social problem or issue that students would be interested in solving. And we go through the technologies and careers that would help solve those issues in real life. And therefore they learn about STEM careers and STEM technologies. We're going to be a little bit different in our coding block here. So I just want to contrast what we're doing here versus our missions. And as you know, on our traditional missions, we have all the interactive lessons, the mission challenge, hands-on projects, the design thinking, the career videos, 3D printing, and also coding activities. But this is where we're really going to ramp it up on the coding activities here and make it possible for you to do these sort of activities in your own classroom. So what are we doing here today? We are now released a 20-hour course. We're not calling it a mission. We're going to call it a course, because it's going to be more instructive and it's not going to be a storyline like the other missions have. But it allows you to introduce computer science and a real text-based computer programming for middle school students. It makes it easier for you to do that. And what we're going to see is that we're going to include things like computer hardware and software, algorithms, offline games, coding statements, cybersecurity. But one of the things we are going to do, and we're not going to let go of what we traditionally do in Learning Blade, is we're going to put a context around things. So we're not just going to start off and start coding some statements. We're going to put the context around it of what are computers? How do they affect our society? Why do we need to have a program in the first place? We're going to do some of this offline before we get online. And then we're going to round it out with, cybersecurity being a big issue nowadays. We're going to talk a lot about cybersecurity. We're going to talk about being a good digital citizen, being responsible while you're online. And of course, like all the things we do in Learning Blade, we're really about bringing the careers to students. We're going to end this talking about IT careers, several different IT careers, and we're going to give the students an opportunity to really investigate a career for themselves. So we are going to really wrap this whole thing, not only in the context of society, but in the context of careers, because careers and giving students an objective for a career in their life is really what we're about. And we're not going to change that here in the coding course. So I will say that the birth of this, and I know a number of you are from Arkansas, but a number of you are not. I will say that the birth of this idea was back in Arkansas, because Arkansas, as many of you know, was the first state that required every school to provide high quality computer science coding for all students, and initially for all high schools, but now for all students. And now what Arkansas has done is required what they call a coding block to be taught in 7th or 8th grade. So this is not simply integrating computer science into other topics. They are looking for a single, an extended period of 4 to 5 weeks in one class. So it's not a class, it's not a semester class you're going to sign up for, but they want you to take some time out in one of your classes in 7th or 8th grade for at least 4 weeks and teach text-based coding. So it's not just block coding, it is text-based coding. Now, one of the things is this requires a lot of work on the part of the teachers. So, and this requirement in Arkansas, this can be taught by any credentialed teacher. Any teacher that has a license to teach in middle school can teach coding block. And a lot of them have been called upon to do this. And a lot of them actually want to do this because it's a lot of fun and it's very interesting. But the issue is, of course, not all these teachers really have a background in computer science. In fact, the large majority of them do not. So they need some assistance. They need some help to get through this. And I know that the Arkansas Department of Education has done a great job in making PD available, helping teachers through this. And I will say, we did lean on some of that PD that they performed in Arkansas and learn from them, use some of their examples. So we have actually used some examples from a couple of years of experience in Arkansas and what we're doing here. So I want to give a shout out to the Arkansas Department of Education Computer Science Initiative, Anthony and his entire team, who have really been working very hard on this topic for a while and who helped assist us and provided some materials to make this course possible. So what are we doing in this Intro to Coding course? We're going to provide a framework that makes it easy to provide a well-rounded introduction to text-based coding, really for any teacher. Now, I'm going to say this is not a set it and forget it type of thing. This does require some effort on the part of the teacher. We are going to include a variety of different activities here. So it is something that you will have, as a teacher, you will have to get involved in, but we're going to give you a roadmap for the entire thing from beginning to end. But, you know, everybody knows in Learning Blade, these interactive online lessons. We do include these in the Intro to Coding course or mission. But we also very much now highlight the hands-on activities plus online coding experiences with places like code.org and other websites where students are actually going to go and give and do the actual coding. But it is going to be something that you as a teacher are going to have to work with the students to lead them through these exercises of doing some online exercises and some coding experiences. But we're going to give you exactly what to do. We're going to give you all the answers. We're going to give you everything you need to do this and hold your hand through it. But what you're going to see is our online mission or online course. We're going to specifically reference each of these offline activities as the students go through this and give them an opportunity to work together, but to have it recorded that they did these offline activities and actually give you a way to get back some feedback from your students and some results from your students as they go through these offline activities and online coding activities. So if you did the entire part, and like any Learning Blade course or mission, it's in chunks and you can choose the chunks you want to use. So you don't have to do exactly what we say, but with all these different experiences, we've given you about 20 hours of activities that you can use with your students to teach them text-based coding. So how do we do that? What's basically our outline? So I'm going to go online and show this to you, but before I do that, I want to point out that we're going to start off with the role of computers in society. We're going to go to basic concepts of programming. What's a program? What's an algorithm? What are basic statements? We're going to first use that technique, writing code for virtual robots using VEX, if you've ever heard of VEX robotics. We're going to talk a little bit more about creating interactive programs and then use Pencil Code, which is another website, to actually have the students create their own game. And we're going to give you all the code you need to do that. We're going to talk about creating mobile apps, and we're going to have them design their own mobile app on paper first, but then have them do some brief coding on a simulated mobile app online. Then we're going to go off and talk about where does this really go in real life? Where do we take these skills in real life? And so we're going to talk about some real business applications. Specifically, we're going to talk about searching and sorting and we're going to talk about databases. Because in real life, when you interact with the computer, if you interact with a website and doing something on a website, you're almost always working with a database in the background and using that, searching the database, sorting some information out of it, whether you're searching for something on Amazon and looking for something to buy, or you're looking through friends' posts on TikTok. There's a database behind that. It's searching through that database, it's sorting it in the algorithm to develop the list that it thinks you need to see on your social media. And we're not going to get into a lot of complicated things about that, but we don't understand a little bit about what these things mean. Finally, we're going to round that off with cybersecurity, because we can't be talking about going online with middle school students if we don't say something about cybersecurity, if we don't say something about being a good digital citizen. So we're going to round out with that. And of course, like I mentioned, we're going to finish off with the careers. We're going to talk about the careers, and we're also going to give the students an opportunity to do a little presentation on a selected computer science career. And why do we want to do that? Because even with the introduction to computer science we had earlier, we've named that now Introduction to Computer Science Careers. We have shown that going through and talking about computer science careers, specifically using Learning Blade, increases their interest in following those computer science career paths. So we want to continue to do that. We want to continue to highlight the careers, but we want to do it in a way that we actually get an experience with coding while they're doing that. So that's what we're going to do. We're actually going to go through and take a look at the course online now, if we can. So I logged in as a student in Learning Blade. I know many of you on here probably already know how to do that, so I'm not going to go through that part. I do also want to say we do want to make this interactive. So if some of you do have questions, you can put them in the chat. You can speak up. I have no problem with that. We're very happy to answer questions now. So you'll see on here now the missions that you're used to seeing in Learning Blade. But if you scroll down a little bit now, you will see Introduction to Coding. This is the new course. Now, the one we had before that was called Introduction to Computer Science, which really goes into the computer science careers, we've named that specifically now Intro to Computer Careers. This is the short course, like 2 hours, only talks about careers, does not include coding. If you want to do the coding part, the thing we're talking about today is called Introduction to Coding. Okay. And before we do that, I will point out in your teacher account, if you log in as a teacher, now I've gone over to a teacher account. So we see our students and we see our classes. So in a teacher account, if you go to your resources page, if you haven't been using the resources page, you should, because there's a lot of good stuff here, because we have all those mission challenge projects and we have all our design thinking and we have, parent activities you can send at home. We've talked about all those before. Those are aligned to our 12 missions. But the thing you want to see now is the one called Coding Resources. If you click on Coding Resources, you'll see a whole list of activities and lesson plans that are going to go along with the online course that the students are going to see online. The first one you'll see here in all caps, Introduction to Coding Course Instructions. Okay, this is something you're going to want to have. I've already downloaded that here. And this is basically, it's going to go through the entire outline of the course. Now, it gives you a little bit of an introduction. It points out the fact for any of you might be new to Learning Blade, that you will want to have the students get their own account in Learning Blade. We can go back over that at some point, but about setting up a class code or using Clever, to get them an account in Learning Blade. They will want to have that. We did point out that the lesson plans are available in your teacher account. That's where we got that from. We're going to talk about uploading results a little bit later. But as we go through this, there is actually an outline of every different lesson and activity in each of the sections in the mission. So if I go and look at what the student sees, that's not it. If I go here, so I go to Introduction to Coding and I start this mission, the student now is going to see, instead of tools and teammates, we're going to have technologies and careers. And this is where you normally launched off those lessons in Learning Blade. Now you'll see here that under the technologies, we've actually numbered these because we do think, in the past in missions and Learning Blade, you could really do it in any order. You could pick anything you wanted. And this one, there's a little bit more of an order. Again, you can do it however you want to, but we will start basically with what are computers, what are different parts of computers, the difference between RAM and ROM and a CPU and things like that. We'll talk about basic concepts of programming, and this will build into more and more complex programming interactions as we go through that. And then finally, talking about the topics of cybersecurity. So if we go back and look at this outline, you will see specifically a list of all those different lessons and activities in the first section on computers in our society, second section, basic concepts of programming, and so forth and so on for each section. Now, I will point out on this, you will see the format. So there's going to be 4 items in this section on basic concepts of programming when the student launches this. 2 of them are the online lessons. You're very familiar with students running those in Learning Blade. The next one is an offline group activity. Now, this would be sort of like the things you download for mission challenges online. But now we specifically point out to you, this is going to be an offline group activity. And finally, there's going to be a hands-on coding, an online coding activity. So online coding activity. And we'll show those for each of the different sections. So you'll know exactly what's coming up, how long it should take, what the concepts are, and so forth. So if I go back to now being a student, let's take a look at some of these. If we start off with computers in our society, we have a couple of lessons that basically talk about the history of computers, starting from the ENIAC and Charles Babbage's computing machine up to the computers that we know today. Bits and bytes, how a computer works. What's the difference between RAM and ROM? What's the CPU? I won't go through those at this point. The second section we talks about basic concepts of programming. And here we have a lesson. Why do we need a program? What is a program anyway? Well, it tells the computer what to do. I won't go through that right now, but then we talk about simple code statements. So computer programs or algorithms are made of simple statements, okay? And we'll introduce the concepts of simple statements, starting off with the classic print hello world. And we're going to have students, and so we're going to emphasize certain aspects that are important things about typing code in statements that produces an output. We're going to talk about having to type things precisely. So we're going to have them type this statement very precisely and get that result. We're going to go on through introducing concepts of variables and strings and so forth. So we're going to talk about, we talked about the print hello world, but we're going to talk about printing, quote, 5 times 5. What does that mean? Does that mean 25? No, because we put quotes around it. So that's a string. So it's actually going to print out literally 5 times 5. So we're going to go through and emphasize certain aspects of this and talk about now, if you say print 8 times 9 with no quote in front of it, okay, those are numbers. So it's not going to print 8 times 9, it's going to print 72. So we're going to actually go through and introduce several different kinds of statements, assigning a value to a variable, doing a little simple math. We're going to talk about order of operation. So if you do 5 plus 2 times 4, the 2 times 4 is evaluated first, and then the 5 is added. So some of the things you need to know about when doing some very basic computer statements, helping them get a little bit more comfortable with that as they go through that. So now they've learned a little bit about statements. We want to talk about algorithms. We want to talk about how to solve certain problems. So we're going to now talk about, first, we're going to do this in a classroom activity. So instead of leaping right into typing code, we're going to talk about developing an algorithm. And you may have seen an activity like this in some of our code activities also. But we're going to do this as a game in the classroom on the floor. Have them, have one student guide another student through a little maze around some obstacles to a goal. And so what we've done, we're going to set up the concept of working through a maze. We're going to have them now say, okay, now the teacher is going to run through this activity. So this is the time for you to go and get out your lesson plan, which we've given you all the instructions for doing this. And in fact, we've given you a little answer sheet. So this is how one student will write down instructions on this sheet and then give that to another student who would then execute those instructions. We've given you the little sheets. You print these things out and lay them out on the floor in a maze. And then one student will write, arrows, 1 step forward, 1 step left, 1 step right, 1 step forward. Have another student give that to another student, have the student write that or run that particular algorithm or set of instructions. and see if it works. If it doesn't work, oh, what happened there? Do we need to go back and check the instructions again? So we're learning something about debugging an algorithm in that. So now that we've done that, we can go back and I won't finish that lesson, but we can go back now and go through the next lesson in which we're actually going to do the same thing, but we're going to do it online with block code. So we're going to use an hour of code activity to do some simple block code to do a similar maze. But I'm going to skip that and go to the next section where we're going to talk about actually then putting that in the form of actual code, text code. So now we're going to talk about robots. We're going to talk about how you have to program a robot to go through a maze. So we talk about introduce the concept of programming logic for a robot, downloading a program into a robot, and then we're going to have an activity. So now we're going to do this online and send them students to an actual website where they're going to do some actual coding. So if I come here, we're going to introduce, here's the commands you're going to need for this particular website. The commands are going to look like drivetrain.drive or forward 200 millimeters, or a drivetrain turn left 90 degrees. So we're going to show these are the instructions that students are going to need to use to do this. You have this in your lesson plan also. And then we're going to get them to go straight to that website now. So there's a button they can click and go straight to this website and be able to do this. Now we're going to show and have given you instruction to how to set the playground to the wall maze. So we're going to do that. I'm going to close this.
With VexCode VR, you can program a VR robot.
Close that. Now I was already in here, so I've actually already got my instructions typed in, but this is the point at which you would help guide the students through. If we're going to have the student start this robot and go around the corner and go to spot A in this maze, how do we do this? So you would help guide the students through the process of going forward, going left, going forward, going left. And when we actually play that program, you'll actually see the robot on this maze, go forward, turn left, go forward, turn left, go forward again, and go to spot A. So you would actually guide the students through creating a real program here that would guide this virtual robot. And then you can have them go through and go to different spots and, you know, have students select a target and ask themselves, is there only one way to get to that target? Or maybe there's a different way to get to that target. Or you can have them do some different mazes where there's various paths to get to the same target, and talk about how there's more than one answer to a solution when you're doing programming. So that's the first experience in actually doing a real program. And we've done that online. Now, in all these activities, there is an opportunity for you to have the student give you back proof. So maybe you weren't in the classroom when this was done or whatever, but you want to record that the student actually did that. So you can actually have the student take a screenshot of this program they've done, and we give you the opportunity to upload that screenshot back to you so you have that proof that the student did this programming. Now, I want to stress that you're not sending anything to Learning Blade. We're never keeping this information. This is going to a place that you specify it should go to. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but what we're going to do when you say upload your screenshot, if your student is enrolled in a class where you've specified that the student can upload the results, it will take you straight to this place that you've specified. In this case, it's a Dropbox file request, but it also might be a Google Classroom page where they can actually specify and upload the results of their activity in Google Classroom. So the student can then add the files here and actually upload. So take that screenshot, paste it into Word, and upload that result here. So now we've given you the ability for students to send back results to you. And we'll talk about that again a little bit later. There also, by the way, there also is a question after that page about the activity. So the students actually do have to answer a question online about the activity they just completed. And so therefore they will actually get scores for these offline activities in Learning Blade by answering the question about the activity. So what we're doing in this situation is we're really highlighting that these offline activities and these coding activities are part of this course. So as you go through this course in Learning Blade, students will be marking off that they've got these things done. They'll be submitting results. They'll be getting a score. The question's very easy, single question, but they will get a score So you can see in the report that they've actually finished this activity. Now, as we go on, we'll actually then start creating things that are a little bit more complicated. We'll talk about creating interactions and programs, and we'll go through another lesson here that talks about, statements and lines and programs. We're going to get into a lot more complicated statements here. Again, we're going to start off with variables, strings, things like that. But we're going to have a number of different statements we go through, if-thens, loops, so we can actually make decisions and repeat actions. We're going to talk about that online. We're going to follow that up with a card game. And it's a card game done with a deck of cards. And we can talk about if this card, then do this. So if-then, they're going to practice if-then statements using a deck of cards. And then we're going to lead them through some activities, drawing some simple shapes with turtles. I'll go through that. But then we're going to actually have them put together a bunch of statements to actually make an actual game online. So again, we will have talked about these before, but we're going to give them a list of all the commands they're going to need. So here's all the commands they're going to need to do this activity. Your teacher guide has a nice little handout of these, by the way, that you can refer to or give the students that they can refer to. And you're going to go through and talk about with the students each step of the process. And so what we're going to do then, lead the students to this website, pencilcode.net. I've actually got one. You'll click Let's Play. And now you can actually, have this little turtle here. They talk about it as a turtle. You're actually giving commands to make this turtle move and draw lines. So you can make this turtle draw nice little shapes. You can do geometry lessons, great for geometry lessons. Have the students draw different types of shapes, calculate the angles they need to turn at every turn to make a different shape, and so forth. But now doing this, getting a little bit more complicated through something that would take at least a couple of class periods, you can actually have the students create an actual game. So I'm going to stop this and restart this. So this game actually draws several turtles on the screen, and then you have this turtle in the green box, which you can move with your cursor keys, and you can go and capture the extra other turtles and move them back to the green box. So you're actually moving this turtle around. And the game is to sort of see how quickly you can do this. Go back. So I've got all 4 turtles now. Go back to my starting point, and I've won the game. It's a simple game, but it's a game that the students actually program. So they're actually placing the pieces on the board in random positions. They're actually controlling the movement of the character in the game with command keys. They're actually monitoring the game to see if it's completed. So continuously taking input and asking ourselves, is the game done? Is the game done? Is the game done? The game's done. Okay, how long did it take? Let's talk about it. I did it in 20 seconds this time. So an actual game that they'll program, and part of what you'll do in this course through the actual lesson plans that we've created. In fact, this is the lesson plan, and we go through step by step, drawing the square, drawing a second square, drawing a second turtle, setting up this game, creating the turtles, placing them on the screen. So step by step, game controls. How do you actually respond to the arrow keys on the screen? Logic. So what happens if you touch another turtle then? Getting the timer, and then putting this all together. And then actually here's the code. In fact, if you want to download the code, you click here to download it. You can download yourself a copy of the code, have that ready to go very easily. And again, there's a chance to upload the student screenshot that they've actually done this through this, and the question afterwards to make sure that they get credit for this in Learning Blade and in the reports in Learning Blade.
And Dane, I'm just going to add on this one, we do have a nice 3D printing lesson, excuse me, for using the turtles to create a pattern that you can 3D print. So we also have a nice connection there.
That's right. You can actually print that out on a 3D printer. Strange, but true. So again, we know we talk about mobile applications. Another aspect of computer programming, because students are so much used to using their phones nowadays, and they're into the apps. So what is an app? So actually, we'll start up talking about, what is an app and how would you go about creating one? And so we'll go through the concept of wireframing. So this is a concept basically of thinking of a purpose for my app. What is my app supposed to do? Who is the user? What is the app designed to do? lead the students through an exercise where they actually consider these questions and then consider what would it look like? What would I draw on the screen? Would there be buttons? Would there be places to input people's names? What's going to happen on this screen? Would there be pictures? Well, you do that by having the students sit there and use some common layouts or start with their own blank screen and have the students sit up there and draw up. What do they think? If they were to design an app to do whatever they want to do, keep track of, how many minutes it is to the bell at the end of class. Maybe they want an app that does that, or how many minutes they have to get to the next classroom so they can do this on their phone. They can create an app for do that. Draw up what would the screen look like on here. So they actually go through that process and go through that design thinking process of creating what they want in this particular app. And then we'll lead them through an activity using code.org of creating a simple graphic app that simply responds to user input. Of course, this is a phone that's simulated on the screen, and go through that process. So now we've learned, some basic concept of what is coding. We've actually written some code. We understand that. We've interacted with the user through the keyboard, done some interaction, made a simple game, talked about, how you would design something more complicated. We actually then take that concept and we do go through some concepts of higher order programming. We don't actually ask them to program this, but we're going to talk about things like searches and string search. So we're going to talk about searching characters, and I'll just type this in here. Get past this. Oh, I know what the answer to that is. So a string search. So we're going to use animations to demonstrate these algorithms as we go through this. So if we're looking for the string ATG in this larger string, how do we do that? Step-by-step process of going through that. We'll actually go through and do other algorithms such as there's some animation there. Different types of sorting algorithms. So we'll talk about the difference between the common types of sorts, bubble sort, insert sort, and so forth, and talk about the differences between different types of sorting algorithms and have them sort of be able to explain the steps of what's going on here. How would a computer explain the steps of what is happening here in this diagram of showing this different sort? And then we'll talk about how that is applied to data and databases. And we'll actually have a classroom activity where they can work with some simple data and some simple tables. And this is really to give them an idea of what a relational database, this is what the world is really like. And so we'll actually give them some data they can work with. So here actually is 3 tables of customers. This is online shopping, customers, products, and then orders. So a customer places an order that contains certain products. And so how you would use these tables to answer questions about what customers have ordered, when they're getting it, and so forth. And we'll actually have a lesson plan where you would ask students questions about this set of tables, and they would have to go through the logic of relating one table to another to answer the questions about what customers ordered, who ordered the most products, and so forth and so on. So you're learning a lot about how databases really work and how the algorithms of an actual shopping site work without going into the details of actually trying to create one, of course. So finally, we want to get back to the topic of cybersecurity. So we'll go through and talk all about the different types of threats you might have online. We'll talk about being a good digital citizen. So, we'll talk about secure passwords. We'll talk about the difference between identity theft, phishing, and smishing, different ways that people might try to get information from you. How can you identify a spam email? How can you look at an email and say, this is something I shouldn't do? What would you see in websites that say, this is probably not a good website for me to be on? If you see an email that asks you questions, how would you think about those questions they're asking you and saying, this is something I shouldn't be telling this person, and so forth. So we actually have a number of different lessons that talk about the different threats in social media, protecting our online world. We do talk about how programmers and websites use firewalls. We talk about encryption algorithms. Breaking the language is actually a lesson on encryption techniques, simple ciphers. So they learn a little bit about ciphers and encryption as they go through this. Finally, then, in the end, of course, this is Learning Blade. We're going to talk about careers. You know that. We're going to talk about, the difference between computer programmers and web developers. So we'll have a lesson where they learn about web developers. We are going to bring some of these videos in there and talk about what they're doing.
Web developers have the unusual ability to think creatively while working with very structured information.
We'll go through. And then finally, we will actually prompt the student to do a report on a career of their choice. So we're going to have them select a career, and we're going to go through and ask questions and actually ask them to prepare a presentation. So they're going to do a Google Slides or a PowerPoint, and we're going to ask them all the things that they should include in this PowerPoint. What is this job? What are the common tasks? How would you get prepared for this job? What should you do in high school? How does this meet your interest? Is this something that interests you? Does it meet your personal goals? What do you see yourself doing 10 years from now? And go out and find 3 different web links that talk about this career, and find 2 job postings where somebody is hiring this career, and tell us about those job postings, and actually do a little presentation and give that back to the class or upload that to the teacher when you're done. So hopefully now we've given you the ability to have the opportunity to go out and give this to your students. I will talk a little bit about this concept of being able to upload results to you from your students. Now, the way you're going to do that, I think I've got a slide on this. Let's go to this slide. Okay. Now we do have the opportunity to submit proof of completed activities. Now I will point, this is going to a place that you determine, and it's your account. It's not coming to us, and we don't ever get or store this information. So you need to set up something, for instance, on Dropbox or Google Classroom. Now I point out these 2 examples because if you just have like a shared folder somewhere, I will warn you, if you have a shared folder where anybody can drop stuff in, but they can see other students' work, you have the opportunity for one student to delete another student's work or see another student's work. So there are things like on Dropbox where you can do a Dropbox file request, which allows people to drop stuff into your folder, but you can't see what other people have dropped in. Google Classroom, obviously, if you use Google Classroom, you're used to assignments. And when students receive assignments, there's an opportunity for students to upload the result of their work in that Google Classroom. So what you need to do is use your Dropbox or your Google Classroom, get the page on that the link on Dropbox for your file request, or the page of your assignment in Google Classroom. Now we're going to take that and we're going to insert it into your class information on Learning Blade. So let's go take a look at that for a second. Go back here. I'm going back to my teacher account. So now I'm in a teacher account, and I've got my list of classes, and I've got one down here called my upload class. And so when you go to your classes now in Learning Blade, you're going to see a little something you haven't seen before, which is your upload URL. Now, this is something we use specifically for the Intro to Coding course right now. And this is something that allows you to put in, this is my one for Dropbox, which leads to the place where I've had students dropping things to me right now using a Dropbox file request. So the process for doing that, first set up your class like you're used to. Second, add students to your class like you're used to. If we want to put John Adams in here, we'll add John Adams and save that and add John Adams to this class. So you've added the students you want to your class. Third, assign the Intro to Coding course to this class. So add assignments. Mine's already assigned right here, but you know that if you want to assign a mission to this, you simply check on it, click it to move over to the right-hand side, which is your list of assigned missions, and then click on Save. I've already done that. I've already added Intro to Coding to this class. So first, create your class. Second, add students to your class. Third, assign the Intro to Coding course to your class. And then go back to your class profile, click on Edit, and that is where you'll paste that URL for your Google Classroom activity or assignment, or your Dropbox file request, or whatever other website you've got where you can have students drop things to you, and you paste it in there. And when you've done that, then that upload screenshot button in the lesson will work and send them to that place where you've directed them to actually upload that information. So I will say you only want to have each student in one class that has an upload URL. You don't want to have a student in two different classes with two different upload locations. That will get the thing whole confused and it won't work properly. So have one class where you have each student and you put them in for that upload URL. So hopefully this gives you some idea of how this course works, how you can work with it. I'd love to have any questions or comments that you might have. Help explain anything we've gone through. So any
We're a
questions?
small group, so feel free to unmute yourself if you have a comment and just go ahead and ask it. I did put in the chat box, you know, there's a lot of different states on this call, but Idaho, Alabama, Arkansas, Mississippi, you know, you name it and more. You can just go to that website link I put, learningblade.com/states, to find your state and register your school. And yeah, are there any questions at this time or any thoughts? Obviously, just reiterating what Dane said, you know, this is really designed to help any teacher, right? Any school. Make sure your middle schoolers are not leaving without some touch points on CS and coding. Thank you, Ashley. I had hiccups. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley.
Comment.
And as Joshua was pointing out to me in the chat, you know, you can then take this back to the hack attack mission or the flu mission and have students really delve into more, you know, what type of problems that these IT people really solve in real life, having done the coding part of this already. So I think it's an opportunity to have that coding, that actual coding activity that sort of relates back to, you know, what the careers we've talked about in the other missions already. Okay.
So I'll end on one last thing, Dane. So if this was to get you guys excited, we're going to send out the recording tomorrow, and we'd love for you to share that with people. But of course, the Learning Blade team is here to support your schools, your districts, your programs. You can email us info@learningblade.com. I'll put that in the messages, or me directly. I'll also put that in there, and we can schedule training for your schools, your staff, your people. So please keep that in mind. There's no cost to that. We just want to make sure we're helping teachers get in there. Tina says this is going to help so much in her key code class. Thanks, Tina. That's an Arkansas class called key code. Thank you, Tina, for that comment.
Okay. And I will say that you can email us anytime. Obviously, you can email info@learningblade.com or Joshua or myself directly. Joshua@learningblade.com, Dane@thinkingmedia.com. We'd be happy to ask any questions, answer any questions you might have anywhere along this way. We'd like your feedback. We'd like your input, make this better. We always try to make things better as we go along. So.
Yep. Excuse me. Yes, Lisa, we do have a library of training videos. So we have a YouTube channel. You can YouTube Learning Blade and find plenty there. But in the teacher resources page, when you have your account, you click on resources, and then there's right there a link that says training videos. Thank you, Lisa, for a good question.
Okay. All right. Well, we appreciate you coming today.
Appreciate everyone.